Hey, 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 we are on the air. This is WeatherBrains episode number 557, and this is for September 19th, 2016. This is the pre-show. And if you're new to this is the part of the show where we get our act together or attempt to get our act together. And we share often boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and occasionally say outrageous things. And I'm all alone. Wow, it's 21 after the hour, and typically at least some other guests are here. But if you want to go right to the beginning of the show, scrub this in about 10 minutes or so, and that's about the time the produced version will begin, the one that is released to the world, the audio version. Most people listen, but we know that many of you do watch, so thank you for being here tonight. From what I can tell, this ought to be a good show. Apologize for last week. We had some technical issues, and look, we knew that going in. You're not going to set up a WeatherBrains live feed from a wild party at a National Weather Association annual meeting, and you'll have noise problems and bandwidth problems and all that. But the show got on the air. We made it. But we are all of our folks are back from the NWA annual meeting last week, so we should have a fairly decent show tonight. If anybody decides to join me. So what I'm going to do is while we're talking, we're going to pull up my notes on who's going to be on the show. Dan McCarthy, National Weather Service in charge, National Weather Service, meteorologist in charge of the National Weather Service in Indianapolis, Indiana. So we're going to drop Dan in the room and see if he'll join us. It's like, no, none of our people have joined us. I mean, there's Aubrey. Oh, goodness, you saved me. I'm here by myself, talking to myself, and I'm so glad you are here.
I'm here, James.
And I hear you.
Can you see me?
Yes, I see you.
I didn't have to turn it
hear
off
you.
on again.
This has never happened before. It's like it worked the first time. Wow.
I got the notification on my phone. I could hear it buzzing, but when I turned around, there was no notification on my phone and no notification on Google+.
Wow. Well, maybe that's why nobody else joined me.
So I had to, it was kind of tricky. I had to basically go in and search for Hangouts.
Yeah, I got the notification on my Google. I still got a Google notification on my phone. That's how I knew to get on. So I don't know.
Yeah, and again, for those that don't know, we use the Google Hangouts platform, and they radically changed here a few weeks ago in that we don't initiate this anymore through Google Hangouts. We initiate it through YouTube, and it's all Google. But the way the notifications go out, it's a little different. So it might be a little challenging for some people to get these. So we got 3 guests, and we'll see if we can get them online here. Engineer Roy. 557. Yes, sir. So we've got it back in master control, and that's good. And I have invited all of our guests. There's one of them. Dan.
Yeah.
Talk to us. Talk to us. Give us a mic check.
Testing 1, 2, 3, 4.
Sounds good. Now we see a picture where your camera's off. But about 75% listen to this show, so a camera is not a total necessity, but we are over on, we do simulcast this on television, so there you go, you're back. Now we see your camera and your audio. Your audio is muted, but I think we're good. So I think I've invited everybody, Rick. And the fun part is getting them.
No, I know Jeff Frame is going to be a little late. He's teaching a class or giving an exam to a class or something tonight, so he'll be on. He probably won't get on until right after 8:30.
Okay, that's cool. And I think Danielle has she works for a Fox affiliate, which means she should have a newscast at the top of this hour, kind of like
Right.
Kevin.
Yeah, so we'll have to get her in and out by like 5 till.
Is Kevin out this week? I haven't seen so much traffic. I think he said he's like.
I think he said
back.
back
home.
in North Carolina.
Yeah. I think he's checking on his parents or something, so he's out tonight.
James,
yeah,
can
but-
you hear me now?
I hear you fine,
Great.
Dan.
I'm here with my James Spann cup.
Yes. So Dan, how's life?
Life is good. Hey, Rick.
Hey, Dan, how's it going?
Things are going good. Things are going well.
Did you enjoy the game?
Actually, I did. I couldn't lose. But I was
figured
rooting.
so.
But I was rooting for Oklahoma. So.
Yeah. Yeah, play that. We didn't get to hear it very much.
No.
Yeah, might as well play it now. You're exactly right.
No, they play it anyway. They played it 100 times anyway.
This you got to admit, this is one of the greatest fight songs in the world. I mean, this is fantastic.
Until you go to a game and hear it.
You know who else has that fight song?
Who?
Yale.
Really?
Yes.
The exact same one?
The exact same tune. I don't know if the words are the same. I hope not.
Wow. We had that when I was in high school. Our arch rival had the exact same fight song, which made no sense because the same song just kept on playing no matter who was scoring. It was insane. But no, I saw a glimpse of that Ohio State game. It didn't look good for OU fans.
No, it didn't. But growing up in Ohio, you kind of are partial.
I enjoyed the band, though. I mean, I'd heard so much about the band, and we didn't have tickets to the game, but we went to campus mainly because they were doing a rehearsal at 2:00 in the afternoon. So we went and watched that. It was cool. It was cool to see them close up. They're good.
Yeah. How'd you like them doing Script Ohio right in front of you?
You know, standing at ground level, I couldn't tell what it was. I mean, I knew what they were doing, but you couldn't see anything. But it was awesome. And then seeing it all put together, from people, people posting videos and stuff. It was cool. Do they always do it on both sides of the field?
No.
I didn't think so.
They do that maybe for special occasions like that. The alumni band, they do on all four sides of the field.
Oh.
Wow.
See,
I know that we were standing on the sideline in amongst the band, and I know they were using every alternate they had. They were trying to get as many people out there as they could. So it was cool. It was very, very cool.
Normally, they just have one big Ohio in the middle of the field.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
So.
I saw them play at a Browns game. I guess it was over a year ago, and they did the double script.
As a Michigan grad, I'm very impressed by the Ohio State band too. Pulling hard for Oklahoma, watching my Illini get drubbed by Western Michigan Saturday afternoon.
Whoop. Whoop.
It was before the storms rolled in and after the storms left for a little while. It was an awesome game environment. We walked around. I'd never seen. It felt like we were at an away game. There were so many Ohio State people there. I mean, we literally. I think I saw just as many Ohio State people as I did Oklahoma people.
Wow,
which was cool. It was very, very cool.
We've had over half our stadium be Ohio State here in Illinois.
Well, you can imagine what it's like in Indiana.
Yeah, that too.
I had one friend tell me that the one time they take the picture of the stadium in Indiana is when Ohio State comes to visit because they're guaranteed that the whole stadium will be red.
And we are going to talk about the lightning situation in Norman. We'll probably do that toward the middle or end of the show because Danielle, if we can get her on here, she's got a newscast. And welcome to our television viewers. Thank you for joining us. And you know the deal. Come on, you regulars that watch on television, Monday night, we always have a little weather party here. And if we're not starting right at the bottom of the hour, that means we are waiting on guests or sharing boring stories or doing something foolish here, which is pretty much what we are doing. And Danielle hit me up on the Twitter, and I have invited her 3 times with that address, her Gmail address. So I don't know the magic formula. Again, I'm the guy that invites people. I don't get the invitations. I initiate this. So I don't know what notification you receive or how you receive it, but I don't know the magic trick. So if one of you guys might help her, but we'll get this thing started here in just a second. We'll give her like 1 more minute but I don't know what else I can do on this end.
Are you sending
She's
the
saying-
link to the YouTube link? I don't know how it works either, but
How did you get on, Rick? I mean, so you saw it on?
I had an old school notification, just like it was a Hangout, and on Google Hangouts, it looked exactly like it did a month ago.
And we got Professor Peters is missing. Let me try him one more time. It's very odd. I figured maybe he lost his way back from Virginia.
He seemed fine there.
He's not here.
Let me respond to Daniel. So, where would you get the notification? I think she's looking on Gmail. You don't get it on Gmail, do you?
I got it on Gmail.
Yeah.
I did too. You have to be in the Hangouts, though.
I just got it on Gmail, logged into my account, and the notification, James Spann added you to a video call, was right there.
Yep. There you go. Maybe she's blocked me. Wouldn't be surprising. So I'm getting all this traffic here. Answer Brian. I don't know what to do. So we got Brian and Danielle that are missing in action. And I think we had this problem last week with Brian up in Virginia. He didn't get on until late. He was having a hard time finding the invitations. So
it wouldn't, for some reason, it just wouldn't let us click on it. I was sitting right next to him.
Wow.
In the dark corner.
In the dark corner. In the crowded, loud bar.
Rick, that was the difference between being a WCM and an MIC.
What's that?
Well, as a WCM, you go to the broadcasters' dinner so that you can be with your partners and things like that. But as an MIC, when Louis calls an all-hands meeting, you go.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
I told Danielle to try hangouts.google.com and see if that would work by any chance. Like the links I have are links to the YouTube video. You can't join it by watching YouTube. You have to be over on the Hangout side. So
if she can hit on her Google, like if she goes to, I went to Google Plus.
She just showed up. Bingo. Okay. We have a winner. Ding, 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 ding. Now we can start, Danielle. We refuse to start without you. Can you hear us okay?
Yes. I didn't bring my headphones, so I'm hoping everybody can hear me good.
Yeah, you're cool. Just if you can, kind of leave your volume down somewhat low so we don't feedback through your speakers. But it sounds fine. I mean, audio sounds good.
Awesome.
So you've got a 9:00 news, right?
Yeah, 10 o'clock our time, but yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right. You're in the Eastern time zone, right? So we will cut out the foolishness and let's get this thing started here. So.
Okay.
And where Brian is, I don't know. We'll work on Brian. So let me get the audio tracks recording, and here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Uh-oh. What have I done? Stand by. Let's try. Do it. Here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oh, never mind. The volume's down. We had to run those billboards the last 3 weeks with an ad message, and that's why things are different. Here we go this time, I promise. Here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey, this is WeatherBrains episode number 557. This is for September 19th, 2016. This is the weekly show all about weather. I think the crew is back from the National Weather Association annual meeting in one piece. We've heard of nobody thrown in jail, which is a good thing. We're still missing Brian Peters, but other than that, I think everybody's back. Aubrey, how was the NWA?
It was fantastic.
How good was it?
It was so good, James. It was so good. We almost didn't notice that we missed you so much.
Yeah, they didn't think about me one time. Rick and I were the two guys that didn't make it. So, but
Rick who?
I know we missed you guys. And you know what I thought about afterwards is we were so busy with trying to get everything in the bar that night. We didn't get a WeatherBrains photo.
No group photo like last year?
Nope,
wow.
no group photo. I've got individual photos with everyone.
Wow. Well, maybe where's next year? Anaheim in Orange County?
Yep. And I can guarantee I'm not going to be
Oh, come on. That's a cool place to be.
Disneyland, come on.
Yeah, Disneyland, the Matterhorn, everything. That's a great place. But anyway, we got an interesting topic, and I do see a lot of our regulars showing up. We finally got Brian. Brian has been trying to get in the show here for 20 minutes. Brian, you okay?
No, not.
No,
Oh.
he's flustered.
There you are. What is up with the Google
Again?
Hangouts? I'm not getting an invite on my screen, but then I get an email, but you can't join.
That happened to me too.
That's what happened last
it's-
week.
Yeah, it's kind of like an IQ test. But Rick Smith, let's toss it to you and let's get this show kicked off. We have a lot of things to talk about. I'll let you bring in our guests.
All right. Let's see. Let me get back to the right screen here. We have an interesting show tonight. We had a listener, Jay Farlow, W9LW, amateur radio operator and storm spotter, suggests that we talk about the outbreak on tonight's show. So thank you for that suggestion. We love the guest suggestions, so send them in if you have any. And if you remember, it wasn't that long ago, on August 24th this year, had an outbreak of over 20 tornadoes touched down from central Indiana into Ohio and on up into Ontario, Canada. The warnings worked very well, but the forecast and the outlook part of the process was a little bit challenging. So we were going to talk about that tonight. We're fortunate to have three guests tonight to talk about different aspects of it. Our first weather brain is no stranger to the show, Dan McCarthy, old friend from, used to be here in Norman at the Storm Prediction Center. Now he's the meteorologist in charge at the National Weather Service office in Indianapolis. Dan, how are things going?
Uh-oh, Dan hung up on us.
Dan's frozen.
Yeah, he heard the show intro and he just decided I don't have anything to do with this.
Bail out while you can.
Smart man.
Yeah, very, very smart.
Well, let's see if Dan gets back, and we'll jump over to Danielle. Danielle Dozier is a meteorologist at Fox 59 in Indianapolis, and I got to know Danielle when she was at KOCO TV here in Oklahoma City. Danielle, welcome to WeatherBrains. This is your second appearance, right?
It is my second appearance. I can't remember the last time I was on, but it was probably a couple years ago, back when I was in Oklahoma with you guys. And I have no idea what event it was, but I'm happy to talk about, all the stuff going on here now in Indiana.
All right. Well, you came and visited Oklahoma not too long ago, and I guess you took some of our weather back with you. Maybe you snuck it in a carry-on bag or something. So, well, we'll get back to you. I know you've got a newscast to get to here in a little bit. Our final guest is Dr. Jeff Frame. Dr. Jeff Frame is a assistant professor at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and Jeff is a contributor to the ustornadoes.com website and wrote a really good summary of this event. And I think that's where the suggestion to have Jeff come on. And Jeff, we thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me on, Rick, and I'm glad you appreciated the piece at US Tornadoes.
Really good stuff, and hopefully we can talk about that website a little bit more, a little bit later on. Well, let's jump right into it. As Dan, I see two Dans now. I don't know if he's unfrozen or not. So, well, Danielle, let's jump over to you to start with. This was not a well outlooked or a well forecast event. It was a challenging forecast, and we can talk about that. But kind of talk about how you, from the TV side of things, how things progressed in the days and hours before this. What were you looking at? I know you were on Twitter and were at least mentioning the word tornado. But what were you thinking as you built up to this day and got into the day itself?
Sure. Well, the week or the past 2 weeks have been really busy here in Indiana with severe weather. And so there were tornadoes around central Indiana back that Monday before. And so that kind of got an idea of the setup around here, not just after working here for a long time as well, kind of knowing what to look for. And so in the days leading up to August 24th, we were kind of anticipating the threat for severe weather. We knew that was at least there. And then the day before, on that Tuesday, the 23rd, I specifically remember going into my colleague's office because we're a duopoly, so the station's like right next door. And I remember showing him some things that I was seeing, specifically the NAM in general. The NAM seemed to be the one that called this, at least from what I saw the day before. And I remember pointing some interesting things out to him, like just different variables that I saw that were unfolding on Tuesday. And so that's when I had first mentioned something on air here, at least, of having a tornado threat, and then actually posting some on social media as well on Tuesday. And then obviously the day of, I usually come in around noon. So the day of, we went on and I went on social media rather, and I was kind of mentioning at least a low end tornado threat. Now, granted, it was not a low end tornado threat, but that's at least what we were mentioning a couple days or so leading up to it and the day of. So the NAM, I guess in particular, was the model that I saw that specifically had some shear associated with the environment, and so that's kind of how it all unfolded. And then Wednesday obviously was the first warning. I think went out at it was like 2:40. Dan, I think, is probably on this call now, but I think it was like 2:40. I think we had the severe warning go out, and then it turned tornado warning pretty quickly. And then I think the tornado watch wasn't even issued until like after 3 o'clock or something like that. So.
Okay, Dan, it looks like you're back with us. Talk a little bit about how the days and hours leading up to the event, the progression of information and forecast. What were you guys looking at the office, and how did things work out as you built up in the days and hours preceding the 24th?
Well, it seemed to me, and Rick, that us MICs were stuck in the corner of the office somewhere. But
doing everything but weather.
Yeah, it seems like it. But during that particular day, we had a nice tropical air mass over us, and we just went through a situation on the 15th, just 9 days beforehand, where we had 8 tornadoes that moved just to the west and the north of Indianapolis. So we started talking about things. I started hearing the forecasters talk about it. And, in fact, we had our WCM Dave Tusick on the desk that day, as well as Chad Swain. And, they're excellent forecasters. We were looking at the SPC's outlook and noticed that we were in a marginal risk for that particular day. But the air mass was unstable. There was question about the amount of shear. Of course, in August, I'm sorry, but, 20 years at the SPC, in August, you don't think tornadoes in Indiana. And so we knew that we were going to get storms. We thought maybe it'd be a little bit of wind damage, maybe QLCS, but it seemed like, as Danielle referenced, that the NAM was a little bit bolder as far as instability and shear was concerned. Sometimes when we get our forecasts in, it's a blend of data, Rick, and you know how that works out. So, all of a sudden at 2 o'clock, I hear Dave running back to the Sioux and myself saying, "Hey, we got storms. They're rotating. We need some help out here." So we were well underway, and one of our interns, or he's a meteorologist. He's been an intern. I hate to call them interns. I really do. But this meteorologist jumped on it, and he started issuing warnings left and right. He was doing an excellent job.
Awesome. And Jeff, you kind of analyzed this event for the article that you wrote at ustornadoes.com, and really looked at all aspects of the event. And we could talk about the model performance, but I thought one of the interesting aspects, and anybody can chime in on this, is as the storms developed, it seemed like, from reading the article, that we started off, sometimes we'll see storms develop here in Oklahoma along the dry line. We'll see discrete storms develop, and then as they move eastward, they'll kind of congeal into a line or something. Was it true that this kind of did the opposite? Did you have a line, Jeff, that kind of started and then broke into discrete storms?
Yeah, over on the U.S. Tornadoes website, it's still the top article over there, kind of the off season here in September. But I have a long radar loop for the late morning into the afternoon, and there was one round of storms that came over us here in Illinois about 8:30 Central Time in the morning. And I remember I was standing outside watching that, And I could see the low-level winds were just howling out of the south. And I just remarked to myself, the low-level shear is really good. If we didn't have these junky lines of storms, if we could get a discrete supercell, you could have a chance of seeing tornadoes with low-level shear like this. And that one moved off into Indiana. I taught 2 classes through the course of the morning. And then another line of storms came and developed right over us in Champaign and moved into Indiana as well. And that's the line of storms that really devolved into these discrete supercells. You had the first one go along I-74 northwest of Indianapolis, and that one prompted the first tornado warning of the day, I believe, and eventually a warning for the city. And there was another storm up farther north near Kokomo, and then another one formed farther north out of that same line up near Fort Wayne.
Okay. This is not a show to criticize forecast. I mean, we know that this was not a well forecast event, and my pick of the week was going to be a talk that I saw John Hart, and several of us saw John Hart do last year at the NWA meeting in Oklahoma City, and the talk was all about summer forecasting issues with tornadoes, and how the typical parameters, the typical thresholds, the STP, for example, shows very little use in summer, because you can get the significant tornadoes in the summer typically occur in weaker shear environments and poor predictability. So it's not really a surprise that this was not outlooked days in advance or hours in advance. Of course, the storms didn't know that it was only a marginal risk and they weren't supposed to happen that way. But, that's always a problem, those darn pesky storms.
Oh, silly storms.
Yeah. But from an integrated warning team perspective, Danielle, I'll start with you. Did that lack of outlooks, a day 3, a day 2, a day 1, slight or moderate, did that impact you as far as being ready, or as far as jumping on it when you started to see what was evolving?
Yeah, I don't think it did 100%. And I only say that because after being here for almost 2 years now, I've realized that there are tornadoes that happen majority of the time in a marginal risk here in Indiana. We've had slight risks that haven't produced. We've had slight risks that have produced. But I've noticed that, at least since I've worked here, the majority of the time that these tornadoes have been happening, there have been just marginal risks out. I hate to use the word only marginal risk, because, obviously we've had that conversation before that anything can happen. But I've noticed that here. And, so I will say the thing that was the most interesting to me, obviously there was a lot of chatter after this event with the SPC and how everything, unfolded or didn't unfold with that whole situation. But, what was interesting is Jeff had mentioned this, the early morning storms that came through, I think had forecasters there at the SPC as well as here in Indiana looking at it, like scratching our heads, like, I wonder how this is going to affect the later storms, if any. Because we did have, and I don't think it was just one round. I believe that we had a few rounds of showers and storms that came through that day. And so in the morning, the SPC had the marginal risk out. And then I think it was, I have my notes here just because I took some notes on it. The 1630Z day 1 was the marginal risk. And then that's when they went ahead and put Indy and points to the south in a slight risk. And so that was shortly before all the tornadoes started, supercells and tornadoes started happening. And so at that point, I remember looking at that and thinking, okay, they're clearly seeing the fact that perhaps these, the lack of showers and storms in southern Indiana may fuel the risk later on in the day. So we'll go ahead with the slight risk down there. And then lo and behold, the rain cleared out and the atmosphere was able to recover. And next thing you know, we have numerous supercells ongoing in central Indiana. So I kind of saw their thought process. I feel like I did, at least with the reasoning behind maybe their slight risk position on that day. But, I don't really think it affected the forecasting at all around, at least my perspective for me, just because I had always thought in the back of my head, well, that NAM is the only one calling for it. But I see, all the parameters, as Dan was saying, it was, it was really juicy that day. We had a warm front that lifted through, dew points were in the 70s, and we had, models that were forecasting 150 to 200 0 to 1 kilometer SRH. So, I don't know. I don't really think it impacted too much, but I could see where they were going with their outlooks as the day kind of unfolded there.
Danielle, I'm gonna stick with you because I know you got to cut out here in a couple of minutes. Talk a little bit about how you handled the coverage. I mean, did you go wall to wall? What were you doing on the air, and how long did that go, and how do you think it went?
Yeah, so the first warning came out, I believe, was around 2:40 in the afternoon, and it quickly went tornado warning, and that was around Crawfordsville area, Montgomery County out here, and I was actually by myself at that point. Chief meteorologist usually comes in around 3, so but he came in early that day, so he came in, he immediately got mic'd up, started helping out. And then, additional warnings kept coming, and we were on air from that point from 2:40 until about 9 o'clock that evening, and then regrouped for an hour. I remember we debated, are we going to stay on all the way up until 11:30 because we have news from 10 to 11:30 here, but we just kind of regrouped, sat back, and then collected ourselves with the 10 o'clock news, and then went from there. But it was myself and the chief meteorologist here on our side. And, we do the best we can. It's the weather here is the way you cover weather here is a lot different than in Oklahoma from, as you know, we don't have storm chasers. At least we don't have a group of storm chasers that we go to send out in the field, multiple, chasers. So we rely a lot on, those 1 or 2 people that may go out just for fun to send us pictures. We get them on the air as fast as we can. Obviously we're showing all of the data coming in, reflectivity, velocity. And we were lucky that day in that one of our photographers and one of our reporters, they were out getting video and interviews of the damage that had happened from the first tornado that hit Kokomo. And as they were doing that, a second just as large, possibly tornado, was crossing one of the main highways through the county there and through the city. So they just happened to get the video when they were out from the second tornado that went through. And I believe, Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we had at least 4 tornadoes in Howard County alone up in that area from that day. So, I mean, we just kind of rely on and we are fortunate as well to have a big presence on social media here at my station, to where we have a lot of viewers that will send in video and pictures and all kinds of things that they're seeing wherever they live in central Indiana. So we also try our best to get those on the air as they're coming in, that way they're as most current as possible.
Hey, explain the difference, Danielle, and we know you have to go in a couple of minutes, between a day like that when you really didn't expect a super big event and the days when you are prepared and you do expect a big, it's a different mindset, and sometimes it's a little harder when you're not quite ready for it.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. When we came in that afternoon, I remember, we said to the afternoon meeting crew, we said, there's going to be a risk of severe weather. We're fortunate again as well, because we're a duopoly. We have a ton of reporters in our station already covering both stations. So we were equipped in that aspect, but in terms of, could we have been prepared better in, possibly sending people out in the field to storm chase? That's possible. But we don't do a whole lot of live storm chasing here, so it would be nice to have that, but reporters here are mainly dedicated to covering, interviewing people and getting video of the damage and whatever else might be out there that day. So.
Hey, Danielle, I'm curious. This is Brian. I'm curious. Do you all ever do any storm spotter training for your news staff?
That's a good question. I had thought about bringing that up. Because I know at KOCO we obviously have done that, and we had a booklet that we gave out to the staff on what to look for if you're out in the field or whatnot. And I actually have thought that in my mind that I want to propose that, because we've talked about a lot of different things that we can do to up the coverage even more. And so that is actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's one thing that I want to bring up, just to have everybody on the same page of what to look for. If we do send somebody out, we send people out during like snowstorms and stuff like that to do live streaming video. So we do have that capability here. We're equipped with live streaming video and Skype calling in the vehicles. So it's just a matter of, maybe getting something like that going during severe weather. But again, it's hard because it's Indiana. You're not watching the dry line and sitting along the dry line like you are in Oklahoma and Texas, waiting for the storms to fire up. Like Dan said, these are either QLCS storms that are quickly producing brief spin-ups, or they're popping, in the warm sector as the warm front's lifted through, and they're really quick type storms. They're quick events. You know what I mean? So it's harder here, I've noticed, in Indiana than it is in Oklahoma, just to say, hey, let's send a chaser out and go stick them out in Montgomery County and hope something happens there. We just don't have that freedom, or have the dry line in play to do that. So unfortunately,
and you got a station in this. You're a duopoly, so you got what, Channel 4? Are you all in the same building? And what's the relationship between the weather staffs? Do you do this? Is it the same team or separate teams?
Yeah, it's we're all collectively the Weather Authority, and so there's 7 of us. There's 4 on staff on my side on Fox, and there's 3 on staff on CBS, and CBS is literally right down the hall. And so there's a separate studio in our building for their set, and we all work together. Our forecast, we collectively go over the data, or at least go over the numbers for the 7-day every day together, just to make sure we're all on the same page and we're communicating a similar weather message to the staff, because we don't want to be, one team is saying one thing and the other team is saying another. So we try to get on the same page the best we can before we alert the staff.
But during tornado coverage, you're doing separate programming, right? Yes,
that is correct. Yeah. So the Fox 59 will have their own coverage, and CBS 4 will have their own coverage, and the reporters will go between. So the reporters help out where they're needed.
Have you ever thought about simulcasting and pooling everything together? Does that not make sense in that situation?
I have heard that is something in talks that they have wanted to try, but it hasn't come to fruition yet.
Okay. Now, are you on at the top of the hour here? You got 2 minutes before showtime.
I've got 2 minutes, so I do have to go.
Okay.
I am pushing it.
Thanks. Appreciate the answer to the question.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, guys. I'm going to have to sign out now.
Have a great show. Go photobomb those boneheads on Channel 4 over there.
Okay. They go on it a lot, so they've got some time.
All right. Thanks, Danielle.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Appreciate Danielle joining us. Well, Dan, let's jump back over to you, kind of going kind of the same question I asked Danielle. I mean, of course, there's a different mindset in an event that you're looking at days in advance and has the potential to be big. How do you think the integrated warning team performed? I'm thinking specifically about, your emergency management partners, the storm spotters. I mean, it seemed like, the warnings seemed to still go fairly well, and everything, once it got underway, everything seemed to work okay. I mean, was that your feeling there? And talk a little bit too about how many other Weather Service offices were affected. I think this affected 3 WFOs, but talk about that too, if you don't mind.
Well, I think for the most part it affected 2 WFOs, ourselves as well as Northern Indiana.
Okay.
And Northern Indiana had the tail end of our activity, and then they had also a tornado that went through, Van Wert, our friend Rick McCoy, had a tornado in his county, and then Defiance, Ohio, their county fair was interrupted by a tornado. So during that time, now, I'm sorry, me in numbers, Rick. Our largest tornado outbreak in August was in 1969, and we had 6 tornadoes, and one of those produced F3 damage. Right now, we're sitting at 20. We average 21 in a year. And I'm sitting at 19 just for those 2 days. So, it was April and August. But like Danielle was saying, we were ramping up, expecting storms, severe storms. And as you watch the outlooks go by, originally we weren't in a marginal risk when the initial outlook came out at, what time does that come out, Rick? In the middle of the night, like 2 in the morning or something like that?
Something like that.
And then the 13Z outlook came out, and we were in the marginal. But then when the 1630 came out, that was a wonderful move, really, to stretch the slight risk along I-70 and south. I don't know how our I-70 is like your I-35. So it really delineates things for us. But, I noticed that the northern part of that slight risk was just between Indianapolis and Kokomo. So it was close. And actually, when you think and you look at the plots of the outbreak, it was right along that northern edge. And when you go back and you look at the Lincoln sounding from that morning, and they had 217 meters squared per second squared of shear in the lowest kilometer. And then you look at the shear that was in Wilmington that evening, it was really eye-opening. Of course, when our WCM came out and telling us about the tornado or about the rotating storms, I hit social media right away, and then our Sue jumped in as well to help coordinate the floor. So we ran into action like immediately. And fortunately, like I said, the person that was managing the radar, he started slapping out tornado warnings like crazy. In fact, he's going to be credited with a 35-minute lead time for that Kokomo tornado. So, which is one of the best I've seen since I've been here. So that atmosphere really went hog wild. And I think it was pointed out early by U.S. Tornadoes that there was a boundary in place. It seemed like you had that warm front kind of go through, and then had some rain showers, some thunderstorms, and there were a few thunderstorms that put down this weak boundary. And we don't have a mesoscale network like you have in Oklahoma, Rick. But there was a very subtle boundary, and that's where everything really started to get going.
One of the things I was impressed by, because it's August, it's Indiana and Ohio, and you're not really, people aren't primed and people aren't driving hundreds of miles to go chase up there. There were still a decent amount of pictures and video online. And sure. Jeff, you collected some of that or mentioned some of that in your summary. Talk a little bit about the chasers that were out. And I know Dan Dawson, who used to be in Norman, was out there sending some picture, tweeting some pictures and things like that. Talk a little bit about the ground truth that was going on, Jeff, during the event.
Yeah, that afternoon after I got out of class, we were actually waiting for Tim Marshall to give our seminar here in the department, and I started seeing these pictures come in from Kokomo, and the tornado warning was out, and you saw the pictures of the Starbucks, and local chasers really got out and took some great pictures. Around Kokomo, Dan was able to get out when he got done with work. He got on the second round of storms that came out of Purdue, and I think over toward the second Kokomo tornado. And I know there were a couple chasers who followed that storm from Fort Wayne up Highway 24 toward Toledo. And I think at least one of those was a real large wedge tornado there on the ground.
Yeah, that was the Defiance one, yeah.
Right. And looking at the names, I think most of them were local spotters in Indiana. We had the same issue here on September 9th. We had a tornado touchdown just southeast of Champaign, and pretty much everybody on that storm, like myself, were locals out of Champaign-Urbana. It wasn't the type of setup you'd look at the day before and say, I'm going to drive 800 miles from Oklahoma to go get this. But those ground truth pictures, and I know that when you're issuing warnings, you put the warning out, you go on television, you say, here's where the tornado warning is, here's where it is on radar, it's been spotted. But unfortunately, there are still people out there who want to see a picture of the tornado. And I think doing that on social media and being able to stream that on the air for our television partners, it's a very valuable service. I think a lot of the time. I know I heard that here on September 9th, back a couple Fridays ago.
Yeah, and Jeff, if I can interject here, we didn't have roadside chasers. I mean, we didn't have like what Rick has to deal with down in Oklahoma. I ended up being chased, if you will, because once 3:30 hit and I heard about the Starbucks, I grabbed an ET because our ET has the car with the siren lights on and everything like that, and so we started heading up to Kokomo around 3:30, 4 o'clock, and we managed to catch the Indianapolis cell as it was leaving, moving to the northeast part. That produced a tornado in the northeast part of Indianapolis. But as we got up there, we found the position where the tornado that hit the Starbucks started.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, there was the tornado that was in northern Howard County. Now, let's let everybody know here. Howard County does not have any sirens. Oh, okay. Nobody knew that, huh? No.
They're better off.
James Spann is applauding, going, yeah, it's great.
Finally.
And funny how I found this out is they had a situation with weather radios that they were giving away at one time, and they wouldn't work during one of our weather radio tests, and there was an investigation by one of the news stations, et cetera, et cetera. But to get back on track here, so there was another tornado that was in northern Howard County, and somebody came by and said you could see debris in the air from that one. Well, I also noticed, thank goodness for radar on phones and things like that, and the ability to look at that, we're about 3 miles away from the next one. And so we moved south, and we got into position, and we ran into one of our ham radio operators, Rick, that said, well, this one's number 4 that's coming, and we had to get out of the way of that one. So we managed to be located just on the Tipton-Howard County line, just south of that. In fact, we're a country block away from Dan Dawson, and we managed to get pictures of the same tornado and the same huge mesocyclone that occurred. So there were 9 tornadoes that particular day just in our forecast area.
Well, Dan, you mentioned it, and Jeff mentioned it too, the Starbucks. I mean, every event seems like it has 1 or 2 iconic videos or pictures, and certainly the video that was shot from a Chili's or Applebee's or whatever that was next to Starbucks shows the Starbucks being destroyed. In my opinion, it looked like it folded up like a wet cardboard box. So,
amen.
I don't know what. And you were. I'm assuming you surveyed the what?
That might be being polite. There you go, being polite again.
I'm insulting cardboard boxes, probably.
Oh, well, yes, you are.
No, I'm sorry, but Dan, I mean, obviously, my opinion,
own it.
In my opinion, I mean, that's one of those examples where the damage looks worse than it was from an EF scale perspective. I mean, did you look at that damage, and what was your take on the Starbucks specifically, since that got so much attention?
Well, when I finally was allowed to get the Starbucks, after the storms curtailed, we headed right there, and of course there were TV stations waiting to see what was going to happen, and I did not see the video beforehand. And Jeff made the comment that Tim Marshall was in town and Tim wasn't in Kokomo. I'm like shocked. But anyway, I walked around that Starbucks, and it became evident on the southeast side of it that it had one of those metal surrogated type roofs that are flat. Then they put the roofing tar, paper, and that on top of it. Well, you can see where that was lifted up high enough to where the walls just collapsed in, and then the damage just happened. So in my estimation, Rick, looking at the degrees of damage, it was leaning, just that building alone was a low end EF3. I dropped the miles per hour down after being close up to the building and seeing exactly what happened. I mean, it wasn't a total lift up the roof, the walls clammed down, and then the roof caved in. It was just enough to let the walls cave in. So when I saw then the film from the Chili's next door, and God bless them, I mean, they did stay away from the windows, and they got the bar between them and the building to take those pictures, but it verified exactly what I estimated was going to happen. So, but believe it or not, when I was doing the news and people interviewing, well, what are you rating this? I said, this building alone is EF3 damage, and it's kind of a low end. So I lowered, but I said, has anybody looked across the highway? There was a whole neighborhood of homes with walls down. One house had just the front facade standing, and the construction was questionable, of course. And I had to leave the interviews just to go get that, because anytime I can look at damage right after the tornado, before any cleanup starts, I want to get it as soon as possible.
Yeah, that's a rare opportunity. Now, there were people in the Starbucks, right?
Yes, there were 20 people in the Starbucks. And
where did they go?
If you ever been to a Starbucks and needed a bathroom, you'll know there's only one bathroom in a Starbucks. But that the gentleman that was the manager that night, he heard about the tornado warnings as the tornado was coming into Kokomo, because it was protected by a strip mall. And the strip mall was a very built strip mall. It had a Best Buy and a couple other stores, and I noticed an AT&T on the end, but behind it you can see all the trees that were stripped of its bark and things like that. So I think there was some kind of extra spin that was provided by the strip mall that really affected that Starbucks.
So what you're saying, Dan, is that strip malls cause tornadoes? Can we get that on
I didn't say cause tornadoes.
I thought it was mobile homes.
And
No, they just attract them.
Next to strip malls. Oh, my.
That's funny, because the tornado number 8 and 9 that went south of town missed a mobile home park.
That's unheard of.
I know.
Wow.
Only in Indiana.
But I guess one of the, and we probably should have led with this. I mean, one of the great parts of this story is there were no serious injuries, no fatalities. Considering this is in the the middle of the afternoon on a weekday, I mean that's pretty awesome.
That's right, and it was just after school let out. So,
Hey, for Dan and Jeff, let me ask you guys this: what is the lesson, the takeaway, the rest of the weather enterprise can learn from this event?
Well, I guess I'll take it. What can the Weather Enterprise learn from this event? Well, I wrote a couple things in the piece over at U.S. Tornadoes, so I'll just paraphrase what some of that is. The models aren't perfect. And what I did when I wrote the piece is I tried to put myself in the mind or in the shoes of a forecaster that morning, where you're looking at all these clouds and rain coming from Illinois into Indiana. I went back and looked at the models and said, would it be possible that I would predict this? And it's another reminder that our numerical weather prediction models, although they've gotten very good, 10 years ago, I couldn't imagine having the tools we have at our disposal now in terms of numerical modeling. They're not perfect, and they're really never going to be perfect, and neither is anything else. Observations, really important, and don't discount the observations. Like Dan mentioned, the 200 meters squared per second squared 0 to 1 helicity on the Lincoln, Illinois sounding that morning, certainly impressive for August. And when you get that much low-level shear, sufficient deep layer shear coming over this real juicy August warm, moist sector, it's something you don't really want to ignore, especially when you have that little vortex, that mesoscale convective vortex coming through as well. And I think even if you look at the September 9th Champaign County, Illinois tornado, that slight risk came out at 1630 UTC. And that raised some eyebrows, and folks, I think, paid attention to that. And I think more than one person I talked to said, yeah, this reminds us of August 24th in Indiana. Now, it wasn't that high of an end event. And I think the last thing to take away is for the general public is that we say, there's a moderate risk or a high risk, or we're looking at a tornado outbreak in 3 days. Have your plan in place. Always have your plan in place, because sometimes tornadoes do happen when they're not predicted, or they're not expected, or you're not expecting an outbreak. But those people, I think the warnings were very good. So hats off, Dan, to all of your crew at NWS Indianapolis and the Northern Indiana office as well, and the media partners. But the public, still, when they hear those warnings, they had to know what to do. And they did that. And I think that really did help, since we're talking about at least a few EF3 tornadoes in this event.
Yeah, and I think Rick wanted to know about the gentleman that was in charge at the Starbucks. He knew exactly what to do and when to do it. He knew that a warning was in effect, and it was a long period warning. We always ask each other at conferences like NWA, and that how much warning is too much warning, how much lead time is too much lead time. But it forced him to monitor the situation, and he knew exactly what to do 15 minutes before that tornado came through the apartments behind that strip mall, and knew to get those people in. There was a young lady that was interviewed and says, if it wasn't for the actions of that person, of that manager, I would not be here today to tell you what happened. That just really rang true.
Wow.
Dan, if you would comment on the SPC performance, any comments on their how they did that day? Obviously, nobody knew that was going to happen like that. What do you think their performance was like?
Well, I think the performance. Yeah, I asked myself, James, what would have happened if we didn't have the 5-tiered outlook right now? And I think we would have had a large slight risk out. Instead, we had the marginal to the slight. I think the actions that SBC took in the outlooks later that morning, once they had the observational data and had a good look at the new model data, did exactly what they should have done with the slight risk. I don't know if you can get the area perfect. I had a chance to talk to John Hart in Norfolk last week, and he was true. He thought the same thing I did. If we had another situation like that, I'm not sure what we would do. I think we're going to be overly cautious from now on. But during that situation, and I went back to look, and yeah, we had a ridge of high pressure not far away from us, but we still had 40 knots out of the west, out of Lincoln, Illinois. We still had 35 knots from Nashville, I believe. So there was the shear right there. But I think with the hand analysis that they do there at SPC and the experience of the lead forecaster that particular day, I think the move was correct. But like I said, I think if we had the old system of slight, moderate, or high, I think a large slight would have been in place. Instead, we went from marginal to slight.
If I can jump in here, I think it says something about how good SPC is on the average, that an event like this comes up and we're talking about how SPC somehow, not dropped the ball, but how it was poorly forecast when 20 years ago, this would have beaten us. And I think it's a real credit to the folks at the SPC that they are so good so much of the time that this kind of event can happen. And we all look and go, well, geez, they're human. And even day of, they made the right decisions, but we're used to seeing these things coming 3, 4, 5, 6 days in advance. Whereas 20 years ago, just the upgrade to slight risk that day, we would have considered that a success.
Yeah, so, and Nate, just to build on that a little bit, since I'm old enough that I was at SPC 20 years ago now, it's hard to believe. But, given the models we had 20 years ago, given the knowledge that we were just learning about, at that time we called them Netty Eddies after Ned Johnson, but now they're MCVs, and to see that MCV come out of Northeast Illinois, if I'm not mistaken, Jeff, we saw Satellite had a MCV that came out of that Northwest Indiana. I think that was the kicker that really got things going.
Yeah, I agree. That came out of convection that formed over the plains the night before, and as well as I do, predicting those more than 12 or 24 hours in advance can sometimes be tricky. And then just south of those little MCVs, those convective vortices, you see a localized enhancement in both the deep layer and the low-level shear. And then as that spin comes in, it can provide large-scale ascent to help form those storms. Absolutely.
Right. And Jeff, back in the day, 20 years ago, we didn't have as many vortices and vortmaxes on model data like we do now. I mean, when I sit, believe it or not, Rick, I still sit at the forecast desk once in a while. But when you look at a 500 millibar map now and see the hundreds of vorticity X's that I have to cut everything back a half just to see what's really going on. I think the mesoscale modeling is great. I think the grid, the 5 kilometer grids or whatever we're using, or even down to 1 kilometer, is good. But it comes back to what Jeff said earlier. If I could have more upper air data 2 more times a day, I'd be really happy as a severe weather forecaster.
So let me ask you guys this now, Dan. It seemed to me from watching from a distance that the short-term warnings issued by your office were excellent. Did you have any that you happened to miss? Because to me, it looked like you hit them all.
No, we missed. Just to give you an idea, we missed some tornadoes that occurred in northwest and north central Tippecanoe County. There were some spots in there that it's really great to have Dan Dawson and Robin Tanamachi out here at Purdue. We've developed an instant partnership. Of course, Mike Baldwin is out here too from OU. And believe it or not, Ernie Agee at 72 years old is still kicking. So to have those guys as partners is really fantastic. But no, we kind of missed some of these smaller tornadoes that occurred in Tippecanoe County.
Yeah, and again, people think that there's going to be warning for every tornado with today's technology. That's not true. We can't catch these AF zeros. They're very hard. And by the time a warning goes out, the damage has been done and the thing goes back up. For the larger ones, these F3s and higher, yeah. But for the smaller ones, people need to understand that's whack-a-mole stuff.
Yeah. I wanted to make one other point about these storms. And after being out there, once I started to head to Kokomo and ended up chasing storms myself, there was no lightning with these storms.
Wow, so they were showers then.
Yeah, they were. It was creepy. I'm getting boiling like tornadoes that I'm used to seeing in Oklahoma, but there's no lightning. I was like, I'm missing a show here somewhere. So that's really something to note.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I was going to say in some of these Midwest tornado, higher end tornado events, like this one, like if you think back to July or June 22nd of this year, the Northern Illinois event near Chicago, or even last year, I think June 22nd or June 20th, Coal City, Illinois, some of these other ones. There have been no hail in these events, but no lightning back on August 24th in Indiana. That one to me was quite surprising. And I think that happened on the August 15th too. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That is correct.
Yeah. So you talk about a tornadic thunderstorm. Well, in this case, we had a tornadic shower, I guess would be the correct definition of it.
Yeah, and we usually get that with tropical remnants, those type of storms. But that's exactly how these behaved.
What were the tops of these storms?
Oh, boy. I don't know. You don't know? I was going to guess 30,000 feet.
I was about to say they're probably pretty low top, weren't they?
Yeah. But the amazing thing about it, and Rick, the latest features and the latest tools we have with the dual pole radar, boy, that was a real help to our warning forecaster. Some of the things you're getting with MRMS and things that are coming out of the lab and coming out of some of the test beds, that was a real help for our warning forecaster.
Yeah, the debris balls, and to say a radar confirmed tornado is here, I think is a real big help.
Yeah, have you ever seen a better debris ball that produced nothing out of near Danville, Indiana on the 15th? I mean, it was a very well-defined debris ball, and I took the emergency manager 1-2 miles away from Danville and didn't see a speck of damage.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you this. Did you use the wording tornado emergency at all during this event, Dan?
Yes, we did. We did with the Kokomo event, and I think that was issued. That was one of our lead forecasters that put that in there a good 30 minutes before the tornado hit Kokomo.
Do you think it made an impact?
Oh, I definitely did. In fact, that was the first time in the night. Can you believe it, Rick? I've been here 9 years now. That's the first time in 9 years we've used those terms.
Wow. And you say you had some counties with no sirens. Well, what's the weather radio penetration in your CWA approximately, if you could guess? I know that nobody knows for sure. 5, 10, 15, 20%? What do you say?
I would say, well, all of Kokomo depends on no weather radio. They had a big drive back about 7-8 years ago, and they had some radios that they were using that did not pick up our weather test. And then they went to Midland Radio and did that. And so I think a lot of Howard County depends on NOAA Weather Radio and TV. Those are the two main sources. And, of course, now what you got in telephones.
Right. I was going to say the next thing, the wireless emergency alert. And we had alerted a lot of traffic about that today when they caught that creeper guy, the bomb guy in New Jersey. they had a WIA message with his photograph on there, which I think is the first time they've ever used it for, looking for somebody like that. But
it is.
I would assume that the WIA system worked well there. And again, we don't know how that sausage is made. That is a great mystery to me. Who pulls the trigger and where the infrastructure of this thing is. But again, it seemed to me from looking at the traffic that the WIA worked up there for that.
It did on both days. In fact, when we were on our way up to Kokomo, both of our phones went off. They said they went off at the office. So whoever set that off, it could have been Indiana Department of Homeland Security may have something to do with it. But it went off anywhere there were storms, which I thought was interesting and really good, because that made people somewhat aware of what was going on.
Yeah, Jeff, give us an overall. Go ahead, Jeff.
Oh, I was going to say, when I get the wireless alerts on my phones, they're faster than Twitter. People tweeting or retweeting even some of the automated weather service accounts. They're faster than seeing it come up on the SPC website as well. So I think that's probably the fastest way in a lot of situations to get the warnings, but obviously you want to have as much redundancy as you can.
Yeah, and believe it or not, INWS was the fastest, because I almost get those instantaneous here.
And I use the WDT guys app, Weather Decision Technologies. It's pretty fast, and I've noticed in at least here, and again, I don't know how the WIA things work, but the WDT app went off maybe 15 seconds prior to the WEA tone on the radio. But you're right, you need layers on this. And the next thing, it's the social science, side of this whole thing. We're all of us are physical science people. We're not necessarily the best at human behavior and in social science. How did people react to the warnings? It seems like they pretty much paid attention, again, from what I can tell from a distance here.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Okay. One of the things that's great about being able to do a damage survey right after a tornado, and Rick can tell you this too, is you get to talk to the people that were affected. And when they turn around and thank you for the warning, or they say National Weather Service is out here to see what happened, wow, they're really impressed. And when you hear, not once, all of you, not once when I talk to people did I hear that it hit without warning. Not once.
Wow. I'm sure some bonehead at some news organization reported that anyway, but that's great. Jeff, how do you think the warning system worked? Do you think people paid attention?
Oh, I think obviously they did. With no injury or no serious injuries, no fatalities. I don't think you can have those numbers with the majority of people not paying attention to warnings, because it wasn't just a situation where the tornadoes were missing population centers or out in very rural western Kansas or something like that. I have family up in the Detroit area, so I drive US 24 from Fort Wayne up to Toledo all the time. And it's wide open farmland, but there are a lot of farmhouses and small towns and things in there. And Kokomo got hit. I think certainly those folks paid attention to the warnings, and they took the appropriate action, and they didn't, stand out and watch it or ignore it or say, I'm going to drive into it anyway, like the woman did in Texas back in December. It's really rewarding to see that.
And again, we stress, Jeff, this is not something you expect. You kind of go through the tornado climatology of Indiana and Illinois. This is not what you expect in August.
No, it's not. When you get into August, a lot of what happens is what I like to call mesoscale accidents. That is, you have this pattern that on the large scale, if you just look at it, the scale of the United States, it doesn't appear overly supportive of severe weather. But when you get down and look at it on the fine scale, the 10-kilometer, 50-kilometer scale, you can see a lot of these details, like these small often diffuse boundaries, or these mesoscale convective vortices. We had a similar incident happen August of 2015, just northwest of Champaign. Supercell formed north of an outflow boundary and dropped 2, 3, 4 tornadoes in the course of an afternoon. They were weak, they were short-lived. And of course, it was the week before classes, and I was stuck preparing my syllabus, so couldn't make it out for that. But I think a lot of these through the late summer, are these kind of mesoscale accident type of patterns.
And you had another event after the 24th, didn't you?
Yes, September 9th, a week ago Friday, it was a very similar situation. We had this effective warm front or outflow boundary parked down to our south, starting to move back north toward us here in Champaign. You had mid 80s over upper 70s south of it. Along and north of the boundary, winds were backed around to the southeast, sufficient flow for storms. And this was another one too, some of the models struggled with all morning and through the early afternoon. They were blowing up storms all over the state of Illinois. And the storms just weren't forming, they weren't forming. Finally, we got a couple down near St. Louis, tracked along I-70. I said, that's great, but I got work to do. I don't want to drive down to I-70 and spend the afternoon doing that. And so I was sitting here doing work, and a rotating cell popped up very close to the boundary, southwest of Champaign. Called one of our graduate students, left the office at 5:30 on a Friday afternoon, and went down and chased the thing. So, and that was another one too. That morning, I was not thinking tornadoes. And even that morning, you looked at the Lincoln sounding, and the low-level shear wasn't there yet. The winds were very weak, down below 700 millibars. So that one too was a bit of a surprise until the SPC outlook came out. And granted, that morning I was not forecasting, I was prepping for my 2 weather forecasting labs that met that morning.
So how did the communication process and the coordination go, Dan, with the EMs and the media? Did you use Weather Service chat? What's your main coordination method there?
Yeah, we use National Weather Service chat a lot. We also still use ham radio a lot. The ham radio people, they're sophisticated enough now that they can go on the internet from home and bring up our severe weather net. So we really didn't have a chance to bring in a ham radio operator into the office like we used to. But I was on NWS chat as well as Twitter. I was on Facebook during that whole incident and trying to describe everybody what was unfolding throughout the whole time. And social media use, obviously, as you say, is kind of a big deal now, something you can't ignore. I mean, you have to deal with it, and you got to do it. It is. I can't be like Rick, but I can try.
Rick, you're good, man.
Well, there's a lot of good, and I didn't look specifically at what the offices up there were doing, but I know, gosh, everybody's just come so far. So, was social media helpful in getting information? I think Jeff mentioned it, or somebody mentioned it earlier, but I mean, were you getting reports? Were you getting things on there that you weren't getting anywhere else? Dan or Jeff, did you see that?
We were getting some pictures, and I had to, in fact, Rick, I kind of had to use the Weather Service Twitter and Facebook account, the Hootsuite, as more information. Then I started twittering on my own account with my phone of what was going on and what I was seeing on radar and things like that. So you basically I used the combination of the two to get information and then give information back out.
Yeah, and that's how I first found out about it. I think I saw either Weather Service in Indianapolis or one of the local TV Mets there tweet out the warning over there west of the city along I-74. I thought, wow, and I saw the couplet and I think that one had a debris ball on it, and I said, wow, this is a legit thing. And I'm just shocked given the radar presentation earlier that morning when it rolled through here.
I say this all the time. Social media is like our window to the world where I am here. We have no windows in this building. We can't see out, and we only have a limited number of cameras. You can't have a million cameras everywhere, and being able to see these images coming in, we can't necessarily show them all on the air or post them, but we see them, and it is so helpful. But gentlemen, we've got to pause here for just a second. We're going to break for WeatherBrains 101. We will have Tony Rice in the astronomy report. We're going to talk OU football and lightning when we come back. We'll have a weather roundup. We'll have picks of the week. Aubrey is dealing with WSI. She just dropped a note. I'm having to restart Core and call them having updating problems. Brian, you can appreciate that, can't you?
Absolutely. 2 shifts ago, I had that problem.
Yep, but if we get her back, we'll do an email inbox. But anyway, a lot more to go here as WeatherBrains rolls along.
WeatherBrains 101 with Professor Peters.
There are lots of observations about the weather and the changes that may be coming. In 1840 in England, Reverend Dr. Brewer wrote a guide to the scientific knowledge of things familiar, specifying the following about the relation of pressure to weather. The fall of the barometer, or decreasing pressure, means in very hot weather, the fall of the barometer denotes thunder. Otherwise, the sudden falling of the barometer denotes high wind. In frosty weather, the fall of the barometer denotes thaw. If wet weather happens soon after the fall of the barometer, expect but little of it. In wet weather, if the barometer falls, expect much wet. In fair weather, if the barometer falls much and remains low, expect much wet in a few days and probably wind. The barometer sinks lowest of all for wind and rain together. Next to that, wind. The rise of the barometer, or increasing pressure, means in winter the rise of the barometer presages frost. In frosty weather, the rise of the barometer presages snow. If fair weather happens soon after the rise of the barometer, expect but little of it. If wet weather, if the mercury rises high and remains so, expect continued fine weather in a day or two. If wet weather, if the mercury rises suddenly very high, fine weather will not last long. The barometer rises highest of all for north and east winds. For all other winds, it sinks. When the barometer is unsettled, or you have unsteady pressure, if the motion of the mercury be unsettled, expect unsettled weather. If it stands at much rain and rises to changeable, expect fair weather of short continuance. If it stands at fair and falls to changeable, expect foul weather. Its motion upwards indicates the approach of fine weather. Its motion downwards indicates the approach of foul weather. Now, these observations of the pressure hold true for many other locations as well, but not necessarily all of them. Storms that occur in England, which is located near the end of the Gulf Stream, bring large pressure changes. In the United States, the largest pressure changes associated with storms will generally occur in Alaska and the northern half of the continental U.S. In the tropics, except during the passage of tropical cyclones, there is very little day-to-day pressure change, and none of these rules apply. If you have a question about the weather, drop an email to question@weatherbrains.com.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
The September equinox marks the beginning of astronomical fall in the northern hemisphere and spring in the southern. Your calendar might suggest this is a day-long event, but it's actually an instant in time. A specific point along Earth's orbit around the sun, which when combined with the 23.5-degree tilt of Earth's axis, causes the hemispheres to receive equal amounts of sunlight. So, on September 22nd at 4:21 UTC, the Earth's north and south poles will be lit simultaneously. A couple of other pretty cool things happen astronomically on this day, too. If you find yourself on the equator, the sun will be at zenith or directly overhead at solar noon. And you might have heard that you can balance an egg on its end on this day. And that's probably true if you try hard enough, but it's also true any other day of the year. It has nothing to do with the equinox. This is a great day to determine east and west, too. The sun rises pretty close to due east on this day and sets pretty close to due west worldwide, making it a good day to find that tree or fence post or other landmark to mark those directions. This will be useful later in translating these directions into your backyard when you're trying to do something like spot the International Space Station or some other skywatching activity. There's a number of ways of marking the beginning of seasons. Meteorologists and climatologists like to simplify things a bit, breaking the seasons into 3 months each. Borrowing on that orbital image again, the relationship between meteorological and astronomical seasons can be thought of a bit like running a relay race around the sun, with the seasons as the runners. We could say that meteorological fall begins the passing of that seasonal baton on September 1st, with the pass completed officially during the September equinox. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
When the weather ball is red, warmer weather is ahead. When the weather ball is white, colder weather is in sight. When the weather ball is green, no change in the weather is foreseen. When colors blink by night or day, precipitation's on the way.
So I was in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Well, I'm hearing some feedback from somebody's channel here. Wow. You guys hearing that? Anyway,
Yes.
I was in Minneapolis, St. Paul last week, and I was with Dan Luna and his team at the Weather Service in the Twin Cities there, and spent a couple of days at their IWT meeting. And at the end, guess what they gave me? This is awesome. When I opened it up, I knew immediately what it was. They gave me a replica of the weather ball. You know, the jingle we just played? That was a jingle that played on WCCO radio in Minneapolis, and I want to say it was in the late 1940s. But they gave me a little miniature weather ball, a replica of the original that song is about. So I meant to bring it down here tonight, but that was awesome. So anyway, let's talk weather, and we're going to focus on an event that happened Saturday. Thunderstorms in college football, Rick Smith, never a good combination. So give us a setup on this deal.
No, it's not. The setup for Saturday, we're talking about surprise events. This was not a complete surprise, but we certainly weren't looking for an event of this scope during the game. But Saturday morning, it began to become apparent that we're going to have storms potentially affecting this huge Ohio State game on national television, and a big, historic not a rivalry, but, historic, powerful teams meeting for one of the few times in history. We had storms developing out in the Texas Panhandle. We had additional storms developing over southwest Oklahoma. And it turned out where the storms came rolling into Norman and close enough to cause lightning problems about an hour before kickoff happened, which created all kinds of issues and questions. And Kevin Claesel and the crew at Weather Decision Technologies that was there at the stadium, I don't envy their position. They did a bang up job providing information, and they had to assist with a lot of decisions. But what it came down to was they delayed the kickoff of the game. They said instead of kicking off at, what was it supposed to be, 6:30 or 6? They delayed the kickoff until 8 o'clock, and we can talk about the specific reasons why that was such a long delay. But we had storms roll through, and because of general admission seating, like is the case in a lot of stadiums around the country, when the message to evacuate the stadium came out, everybody left pretty much except for a bunch of the students, because they had camped out for hours in the heat to get their seats, and they weren't about to lose them, because if they left, they wouldn't get the same seats when they came back. Luckily, nothing happened. Luckily, the storm was just barely, it was sub-severe on campus there, but lots of rain, and the game, it was a beautiful evening once the game started, but it was, it was stressful there with wind and lightning and the delay that had to go on.
So the question is, and again, there's a lot of articles floating around about it, but this headline says, severe weather delays Ohio State, Oklahoma. Students ignore evacuation. And this worked out okay, but, this could have easily worked out to be a disaster. What do we do, Rick, in the future? And Dan, you might jump in on this. You've spent many years out there in Norman. Is there anything we can do, or these people, are they just going to sit there no matter what we say or do? What's the solution here?
Sell tickets.
There's not an easy solution. Go ahead, Dan.
Sell tickets to the students. But, having a former student at OU, each fraternity, each group, they all want to get their certain seats and things like that. And so they all want to get in their groups and things. And so I don't know what the solution for that is. I really don't. I mean, I don't know what they do at the University of Illinois. Here in Indiana, we worry about a bigger problem. It's around the Indy 500 every year. So, if we have the lightning for that, I have a problem.
In Illinois, I'm not quite sure how they handle the student tickets. I know it's first come, first serve. But I know when I was at Penn State, when I was a graduate student there, you got your student voucher like you do here, like you do at Oklahoma. But then the difference was when you went through the stadium, they gave you a ticket for a seat. So if you did have to get up and go somewhere, or, whatever, you met friends under the concourse or whatever you were doing, you didn't have to automatically march up and take that seat. You had that seat reserved for you. And I think instead of assigning the same seat every week, which students don't want, I think if just instead of here's a voucher, go sit where you came, sit in the order you came in. I think if you can exchange that for a seat, a assigned seat that could be different each week, I think that might help remedy this problem. But they're still college students, and they still think they're invincible. A lot of them.
I got a couple of things on this. Number one, I think one thing that it's easy to look past is that typically, to Dan's point about selling them seats, most cases, including at NC State and at Texas A&M, where my wife went, students had to pay a fee that was an athletics fee, and that's what paid for the quote-unquote free tickets to athletic events, including football, basketball, and the other sports. And then you would go and get a ticket or access to the game by way of standing in line and whatnot. And in some schools, including Texas A&M, when you pull your ticket using your sports pass, you get a ticket with an assigned seat. It's challenging on the front end, but at least you've got a ticket, you know where you're supposed to be. That doesn't guarantee that students stay there, but at least it guarantees them, a pass out to be able to come back into the stadium and get back to where they were. So the incentive of I'm going to lose my seat is no longer there. But the second thing is every ticket I've ever bought to any sporting event has always said something, in concerts as well, has always said something along the lines of, this is a license to attend this event, and it may be revoked at any time. And this idea that somehow students, or anybody else for that matter, owns the seat in which they're sitting or standing in a stadium like that is absolutely ludicrous. And universities should feel, if it is a truly public safety concern, if we are concerned, if we believe what we say, that a threat of lightning is lethal and we need to ensure that people are moved to safety, then we should have no qualms about sending event staff and police, if necessary, to encourage folks to leave of their own free will and volition and to be able to come back. Is everybody going to go easily? I'm sure there'll be some that will pitch a fit, especially those who have been tailgating and partaking of beverages in the parking lot ahead of time. But at the same time, I think this is an opportunity for us, and I'm not, casting aspersions at OU or anything. I know that Kevin and the folks at WDT could not have done a better job with laying out the threat once it was identified and communicating that. And clearly the rest of the folks in the stadium got the message. But I still think that it's okay. If we believe this rhetoric, if we believe what we say, then we should be willing to back it up with folks, getting folks out of the stadium. This isn't like a homestead thing. This is not like squatters' rights. It's the university property. And if I'm in a classroom building after hours, the police can remove me because I'm not supposed to be there. And I think the same thing should be that if we don't believe this rhetoric that we're talking about, then whatever, let them stand there. But I believe we do believe it, and I think we should be willing to back that up, and our universities should be willing to back that up as well if the conditions warrant.
Rick, do you know what the public address announcer said exactly to the crowd?
I know that they have pre-formatted scripts and graphics, so that's all rehearsed and it's all laid out in advance in books and things like that in their incident action plan. But I think they specifically mentioned lightning, and I think I don't know the exact language, but I know that there was a message on the big giant, bigger now, the big new jumbo giantron or giant jumbotron, but there was a public address announcement, at least one made, saying that you need to take cover under the concourse or whatever. I don't know the exact language.
And I've heard some comments from people around the country say, well, this is a weather school. Those kids ought to know better. Well, I remind them that only a fraction of the students at OU are majoring in meteorology,
Right.
So go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I was going to ask. Now, Rick, they still, unlike pro events, they don't have ushers at OU Stadium as well.
They do have ushers, but they're typically Boy Scouts or ROTC people or event staff or the contracted event services staff. I can't remember that. There's a couple of different companies they work with, that work for minimum wage and that they're there. And, so yeah, they have ushers, but not in the like we might think of as ushers.
My first year at Penn State in grad school, I ushered for free tickets. So students sometimes are ushers too, depending on the school.
Yeah, but if you tell somebody to leave their seat because of lightning, what are they going to do?
Doesn't it ultimately come down to the responsibility of each person to do whatever it is they think best with the advice they get?
That's my point, Brian. We're not asking somebody to go inside on their own property. This is the stadium at OU is property of the university, which, depending on how things are structured in Oklahoma, may very well be property of the state. I know in North Carolina, the public schools, it's all property of the state, and therefore all of the rules that go with that apply. And
here in Illinois too.
Yeah, so this isn't it is a personal responsibility thing for people to do what they know they should be doing. And I get that there's another incentive here. I mean, they're negatively incentivized to stay because of the way that student tickets are distributed at OU, and that is general admission, and that somehow assigning seats might, remove that negative incentive and allow people to feel more free to do what they, I think, know in the back of their minds they probably should be doing anyway. But this isn't an issue of just, it's what they should be doing. They are trespassing, in a sense. If we have said that nobody should be in the bowl, then an extreme reading of that is that they're trespassing and that they can be removed. I'm not saying that we drag people out kicking and screaming. I hope that never comes to that. But at the same time, I think this idea that they're there and they're allowed to be there and they're encouraged to be there and they have a right to be there is out to lunch.
And
but what got
Rick,
me is
we should mention, Rick, a lot of people did heed the message and went in, right?
Yes. Most people did. Yeah, there may have been a few diehard fans that were there, but they had just opened the gates. They opened the gates for the students, I think, 2 hours before kickoff, and I think they opened it for everybody else 1 hour before kickoff. So they had just opened the gates for the students, and they ended up having to open the gates for everyone else to come in just to get some of the tailgaters and others that were gathered around the stadium in to take shelter from the storm. So it was kind of a messy situation, but yeah, most people left the bowl.
Do you think that Kevin will make any changes in the system after this, and anything needs to be adjusted?
We chatted today about a few things. I think things worked pretty well. I mean, the athletic side was very happy because one of the confusing things to people is it stopped raining at 5:45. How come we have to wait till 8 o'clock for kickoff? Well, the goal in providing a forecast of when the lightning would end and then giving that 30-minute buffer after the last strike was to provide an uninterrupted 90-minute warm-up period for the teams. You don't want the teams to start warming up and then stop and then start back. So there's a method to this. But, things like they continue, before a football game, they're playing music for the teams to warm up and to get the crowd warmed up and everything. That music continued to play even during the lightning delay, which to some could have sent a signal, things are continuing normally. So they're, maybe next time they just shut off all the music or, the little things like that. But certainly there'll be a hot wash after action review, and they'll go over all this and their lessons learned and what to do better next time. They'll certainly do everything they can. I know.
We interrupt this program for a CBS Radio Net Alert Bulletin.
It's Nate's birthday, and we have not even done a single birthday greeting here. What's wrong with us? I feel bad. Nate, happy birthday.
Thank you.
So you were fussed at by Facebook for responding to happy birthday wishes today?
Yes, so I have, people stop. Facebook encourages you to leave messages for other people on their birthday, and I think we all do it. It's part of the culture now, at least on Facebook. But I wanted to respond and not just like, but actually say something, even if it was just thanks. But we just got back from NWA last week, and there were so many people that I get to see there that I don't get to see most of the rest of the year. And I wanted to say hi to those folks. And so I get into doing that at lunch today, and I'm probably 100 posts in, and it pops up this message box saying, you're using this feature in a way that it wasn't intended to be used. You should slow down or we'll have to block you. Are you kidding me?
Are they suggesting you were trespassing?
Yeah.
So my birthday gift to Nate, he gets to do picks of the week because I have to go do television.
Wait a minute.
The floor belongs to you.
You sound like my boss. It's happy birthday. Here's some work to do.
Yes.
I think that's what he just said.
All right. It's Picks of the Week. It's the part of the program where we go around the digital mahogany table and share weather-related anything. Can be a book, a movie, a blog, a Twitter account, anything you want that's weather-related. And we share this for the edification of our viewers and the amusement of everyone else here. And Aubrey, we will start with you. Ladies first, your pick of the week, ma'am. And you appear to be muted. Let's see, still not getting audio. So, let's see, we'll try and come back to you here. We'll move on to Professor Peters' pick of the week, sir.
Absolutely. First of all, I want to say that it was so nice to meet Aubrey last week at NWA. Of course, I saw Nate again, but I've already met him.
You met me. I'm old hat, but
you're
Aubrey
old hat.
Class.
Yeah. And also, I got to meet Ginger Z. That was very exciting. So, very happy to have.
I noticed that we had, and I may get in trouble for saying this, but we had Jim Cantori at NWA. We had Ginger Z. I'm wondering how many more selfies people posted with Jim versus Ginger.
No idea.
Even, but
looking at Twitter, it seemed like Ginger Z had him beat 2-1. Just from what I saw.
I think certainly in the time, because just Ginger was only able to be there for part of a day. Jim was there for most of the conference, actually. And by the way, I want to step back for a second and say something about Louis Usolini, who's the director of the Weather Service. He wasn't able to stay for the entire conference. He was there for a day and change. But when he's in sessions, man, he's paying attention. He's asking questions. Yeah. He's engaged. I love it. I absolutely love it. You got somebody who is, the director of the National Weather Service, but he is jumping in and asking technical questions like the rest of us, he's asking the questions the rest of us would ask. So I love that. I send a shout out to him for that.
But I have to say, you got to have a lot of empathy for the speakers.
Yeah.
When the first hand up is the director of the National Weather Service.
Your boss's boss.
That's got to be a rather big sinking feeling. So
I'm sorry we ran out of time for questions.
Yeah, and Nate, the reason I was mentioning the NWA last week is that there were so many great presentations. You come back from those meetings all fired up, a little overwhelmed with all the things that are going on. But one of the things that's very exciting, of course, is the launch of GOES-R on November the 4th. I hope it's still on. And
there is no GOES-R, only Zool.
Yeah. Okay. And so I ran across some pictures from an animation from the Himawari satellite of Malacus out in the Pacific, the Western Pacific. And so that's going to be my pick. It's a little bit of a larger file, but just to see what we're going to be getting from GOES-R is just wonderful.
Sounds good. Aubrey had to reboot her audio box, so I'm going to give her pick of the week. The West Virginia Forestry Division has had to cancel their foliage reports this year. They've had layoffs of 37 workers there, and so the division will not be doing fall foliage reports, which is sad because West Virginia is a gorgeous state, especially in the fall. And to let people know where the leaves are changing and what levels, what elevations they're changing and what regions of the state, that's a big thing here in North Carolina. It drives a lot of tourism, and will drive my tourism dollars in the mountains this year as well. Doesn't hurt that my folks live up there now, but be up there to take a look at the fall foliage. But unfortunately, in West Virginia, we'll have to just check out the entire state every weekend because the state will not be able to tell you where best to go. Dan McCarthy, pick of the week, sir.
Oh boy, I remember just before Ginger Z took the stage, I was reading a Wall Street Journal article on the top 100 people on Twitter, and she was number one. Nobody from the Weather Service. Sorry, Rick. We're in the top 100. So they were all.
There's a different list out there now, though, that has a lot of Weather Service people on it. So.
Well, good, but
that generated actually no shortage of controversy. Dr. Marshall Shepard, former president of the AMS, sort of went after the folks that put together that list, saying, "You've said these people are all meteorologists, but you've left off all of the non-TV ones, and there's some really good non-TV folks, including our own Rick Smith." and on that list. So it was a very interesting conversation starter.
And then to follow up what you were saying, Nate, was how involved Louis was at the conference. It was good to see all of you there, by the way. I got to go for a change. But what really impressed me was how long he stayed with the students on student night.
Yes.
He was one of the last to leave, and he even had dinner with 3 of the students. So I thought that was really impressive.
Yeah. And I wanted the more I deal with both him and with Dr. Sullivan, who's the Undersecretary of Commerce and Director of the Administrator for NOAA, we had an opportunity as the NWA Council to meet with the both of them after Dr. Sullivan's keynote on Monday. And she's really, I mean, it's on the one hand, Dave Freeman, the president, introduced her as says, she's an astronaut. And that's really impressive. And the thing about it is, if you stop there, you miss the best part. That's just the beginning of how impressive she is. So I know a lot of folks in the Weather Service, are, I think, nervous about the operational work analysis that's going on now. We should have a show on that at some point in the future. But I get very, very good vibes out of the both of them. And I think that when they say that this isn't a clandestine way to cut positions or anything like that, I take them at face value. I don't read any sort of, duplicity there whatsoever. I think, and her comment about, how they recognize that shift work is a burden on everybody. And there are places and times where we don't need 3 or 4 people staying in a Weather Service office overnight. Maybe we can cut that back and limit the amount of shift work and things like that. I mean, just an openness to consider that. I think that's fantastic. So anyway, and I say this as somebody who isn't working for the Weather Service. I probably never will. I would certainly be honored to have the opportunity, but my career path is such that's difficult. So I'm not blowing smoke up anybody's skirt here. I'm really impressed with the both of them, and I'd be happy to work for either of them, given the opportunity. Jeff, pick of the week, sir. Oh, sorry, Dan, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
And I was just stating fact. I don't need to suck up, but anyway, it's also nice to meet U.S. Tornadoes, Jeff, for a change. I read a lot of his stuff on Twitter, and I know he reads mine, but it's finally great to meet him.
Thank you, Dan, and likewise.
And a pick of the week, sir.
Well, before I get there, Dan, I was over at your severe weather symposium back in March, I believe it was. Yeah. Really well done, real good show out there. Yeah, Jeff Petrosky, and I'm trying to remember who else all was there.
Dr. Laura Myers.
Yeah, that's right. Dr. Laura Myers was up from Alabama. Got to meet Aaron Davis, your former intern or volunteer out in Indianapolis as well.
Yeah.
Know his name from Twitter. Pick of the week. We'll just play the home game and go with U.S. Tornadoes.
Nope. You can't do it. You can't do it. Nope. We have a section that's websites from this episode, and you're already in that one.
Okay. Well, we'll do that. So let's see here. Good Twitter accounts to follow. I'll just go ahead and plug the Department of Atmospheric Science here at the University of Illinois, DAS Illinois on Twitter. We were founded back in 1982. Undergrad program just came around in 2008. And I know there are a lot of high school students out there on Twitter, Facebook, elsewhere who may be watching this show. And if you're interested in studying atmospheric science, do well in math, do well in physics, do well in science, and keep those grades up, and you can get into a good program. And there are several great undergraduate programs around this country. So I'll just say that we're on Twitter here at the U of I. I don't run the account, but we'll say that, and they'll say that to the future meteorologists out there, because I know there are several of them. I see them interact with them on Twitter in a regular basis. So,
sounds good, Jeff. Thank you, sir. Rick Smith, pick of the week.
Well, we talked about Twitter lists and who to follow. The Weather Social is somebody that when I see them tweet something new, I'm always excited to read it, because it is the social side of communicating weather, as their website says. And they came out this past, it was on September 9th, 10 days ago, with a new one on warning fatigue. There's a difference between warning false alarms and warning fatigue. And this is a really good examination of what warning fatigue is, when does it happen, and how does that impact how we communicate all types of weather information. So it's a really good read, as are all the blog posts that are on their site if you go to their site.
Fantastic. Thank you, sir. My pick of the week, an article from The Atlantic talking about the state of hurricane hunters and whether or not drones might replace the manned hurricane hunter program. Spoiler alert, they say it will within 10 years or so. So interesting potential there. And when you think about, the danger that's involved in core punching some of the most deadly storms on Earth, if you can let a robot do a dangerous job like that, you're more likely to get the results. You can fly more often for less money and certainly less risk. But I gotta hope that I can complete my bucket list item and get one hurricane hunter flight in before they shut it down, if that is indeed the direction they're going.
I just said that in class today. I want to fly into the eye of the clear eye of a tropical cyclone.
Just not Hugo. That one was a beast. I'll let the pros handle that one. But anyway, well, this has been WeatherBrains. Bill is not here this evening, so I will take a look at our upcoming shows. I noticed that we are pretty much booked up through October. Let's see. Next week, we're not in Kansas anymore. I don't know which guests we have there. Dr. Phil Klotzbach and Alex Forbes on Monday, October 3rd, I suspect we'll be talking about hurricanes and tropical season forecasting. Eric Fleur from Televisions will be here on the 10th. The new incoming president of the AMS will be here. Matt Parker will join us on October 17th. That's going to be a fantastic conversation. And by the way, interesting thing, the first person, of course, the hashtag for NWA this year was hashtag NWAS16. Hashtag for next year, NWAS17. And the first person to use the hashtag for NWAS17 is none other than incoming AMS president, Matt Parker. I think that's a sign, perhaps, of partnership between the two organizations to come. And an interesting show on Monday, November 7th, talking about drones. A couple of folks from the NOAA drone program will be here on November 7th. Saw a presentation from John Walker at NWA this past week. Fantastic, fascinating stuff what they're doing with this technology, and I can't wait to see where it's going and if they're hiring. That would be a great way for me to get into the weather service of flying drones into weather. That'd be kind of fun. Anyway, let's see. Dan, how can folks find you on the internet? Twitter accounts, email, homepage. How can folks get a hold of you if they got any questions?
My Twitter account is Tornado Dan. That's TORN, the number 80 and the DAN. That's how you find me on Twitter. You can find me by Daniel McCarthy on Facebook. That will usually find me no matter where I go.
There you go. Jeff, how can folks find you?
Twitter, Vortex Jeff. Just Vortex Jeff on Twitter. I don't have Facebook. Folks,
you're better off without it.
Yeah,
that's what I hear. Folks can also send me an email, frame@illinois.edu. Pretty easy one to remember there.
Fantastic. Jeff, Dan, thank you for being here, and we'll extend a thank you to Danielle as well at Fox 59 in Indianapolis. We appreciate her being on the program. Sorry she had to run out, but we totally get that whole having to work thing, considering Span bailed on us. Left me holding a little extra work here at 10 minutes.
Well, she's available now. It's 11 o'clock.
Yeah, that's right. She got back on. But,
hey,
anyway.
I hear you. I had to give an exam this evening. I'm about ready to head home. So
there you go. Well, we won't hold you up anymore. We appreciate you being on the program. This is WeatherBrains, the original and the best, all about the Weather Netcast. We normally record the program on Monday nights, starting at 8:30 Central via Google Hangout or YouTube Live. Now, I think is how we're doing it. You can always find it on live.bigbrainsmedia.com. Check out the podcast audio edition. You can find that on Stitcher and iTunes. Of course, you can go to weatherbrains.com. We post all the show notes, all the links to the picks of the week, contact information for all of our guests, past, present, and future as we come to them. But feel free to check that out. Send us a comment, an email weatherbrains.com. And we love guest suggestions. Tonight's show was the result of a guest suggestion from a listener. Yours could be next. We appreciate hearing from you. Until next week, for all of our guests here and all of the panelists, including Rick, Brian, James, Aubrey and Kevin Selly, who wasn't able to be with us tonight. Good night. God bless.
Thank you, Dan. And
Thanks, Dan.
Jeff,
Thanks,
appreciate
Jeff.
you being
Thanks,
here.
guys.
Thanks.
Happy birthday,
show.
Nate.
Happy birthday,
birthday.
Nate.
Thank you all very much.
Happy birthday.
Yeah,
Thanks for not making us sing.
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely.
Yes, no, the coolest thing was coming home tonight, and my 2-year-old was sitting at the table, and I came in, and by herself, without any prompting from anyone else, she starts to sing "Happy Birthday" as only my 2-year-old daughter can, and my heart just melted.
You can't top that.
You
No,
can't
you
top
can't.
that.
You cannot top that. So,
Absolutely.
gentlemen, thank you guys. Y'all take care.
See
Good
ya.
night.
Thanks for having us.
All right,
Yep,
thank you.
Thank you
Thanks
for
a
being
lot.
here.
Good
Good
seeing
to see you at the NWA, Dan, by the way. Take care.
Same here. Same here.
Yep. Thanks.
this affectionately the WeatherBrains corporate headquarters. Basically a closet, which is where I work, and I love my closet. I would not trade this for the world. It looks more like the Turkey Creek landfill, actually. But our weekly weather show, WeatherBrains, has ended. And typically what happens on WeatherBrains, and hello, friends, for those of you watching on WeatherBrains, we're now on Facebook and WeatherBrains. But often the show runs past 10 o'clock Central Time, and I have to go do television. So Nate Johnson, one of our associates at WRAL in Raleigh, took over the show for the end. So I'm going to wrap up WeatherBrains. Thank you guys for watching. If you want to catch Song of the Night, we're on Facebook tonight. It's facebook.com/James Spann with no spaces, and there's 2 N's. Facebook.com/Spann is the regular profile, but it's Facebook.com/James Spann. So if you want to watch Song of the Night, we'll see you guys there. Thank you all. Great WeatherBrains tonight. We'll see you next Monday night. For those of you watching on the WeatherBrains side, you'll have a great week, and God bless.